The Junk King has arrived. Annihilus is a 5/7 on reveal your cards with 0 or less power. Switch sides, destroy those that can't. We're going to talk about some mechanics, counters, and deck lists that I brewed up for you here today to decide whether Annihilus is a snap or a pass. Oh, let's go! Everybody, I am so hyped to talk about Annihilus. This card looks like so much fun. And one of my favorite archetypes in Marvel Snap is the Junk archetype. Now, I am a little bit worried when it comes to this card in terms of its reception, because I think a lot of people are going to really enjoy it and have fun with it. But then on the receiving end, if it's played against you, it's going to feel very, very bad. But we're going to break this card down in a short minute, but we got to talk about the Spotlight caches for the week of Annihilus. Dakin is an available option, a Series 5 card that was previously, I believe, the August Season Pass card, a 3/4, and it throws the Muramasa Shard into your hand. You can double his power if you discard or destroy it. Very fun card, and an awesome artwork there by Ryan Gonzalez. And then you also have the X23 Ryan Gonzalez, and if you don't have X23, when this card is discarded or destroyed, you get +1 energy. So a little bit of discard, destroy synergy there, but they don't really work with Annihilus, but they are good cards nonetheless. So these are two Series 5 cards that I think is pretty worthwhile if you do not own them. Now, of course, we got to talk about the main feature, Annihilus himself. So let's get to some mechanics to better understand this card. All right, so for Annihilus, there isn't a whole lot to talk about in the mechanics department. I think it's a pretty straightforward card, but there's a few things that I want to touch on. For instance, we're not just looking at the base power of the card 0 or less. We can deck build with that in mind, but there's other means of making cards have less than 0 power or 0 power. You can afflict them with negative power. So you're looking at like Hazmat combos, right? Or maybe Typhoid Mary or Man-Thing, these sorts of things to bring those cards in the threshold of Annihilus so that we can flip them over or possibly destroy them if there is no room on the other side. So that's essentially what's going to happen. Now, what if you're in a Professor X lane, one of those negatively powered cards? Well, it's not going to move and it's not going to get destroyed because Professor X completely locks down the lane, which you're going to find out a little bit later when we talk about counters. That's probably the main counter to this card, but for a few other reasons, which I will get into. Another thing is that cards and locations that give negative power can be used to bring a card within Annihilus's threshold. So the cards that I described just previously, but also locations like Sewer System or something like that that display negative power to the cards that are played there. Well, those are going to help you get those cards into that threshold and then push them over, which is awesome. Now, the most important thing, and I think the most nuanced thing when it comes to this brand new card, is that play order matters, right? So a quick example is if my opponent has one card at a location, right? There's 3 empty slots, and I've got 4 rocks lined up at a location. I don't know how I did it, but we managed, and I got 4 rocks there. Okay, you play Annihilus off of that location, of course, and then he's going to send over 3, and then the 4th one is going to get destroyed. But the 4th rock, the rock that gets destroyed, is in play order. So it's the 4th rock that I actually placed at that location in the 4th quadrant. This is sort of important to know because your opponent's going to start to fill up the board with stuff that they want. And then if you didn't get those, really low power cards that you want to flip over out early first, then they might just get destroyed, which is fine. I think there's a lot of value in that, just destroying those cards so they're not on your side of the board. But really, ultimately, we want to swing them over. That's the most fun experience and also probably the most game swinging experience. So you just have to kind of look at your board, and as they continue to play cards, just realize, okay, if I put something negative here, it's just going to get destroyed. I don't have to really worry about it. Maybe I put it elsewhere where my opponent has less cards. Okay, so that's pretty well it for mechanics in Annihilus. Again, as always, with the Snap or Pass videos, let me know in the comments below if there is anything that I missed or you want clarification about. I'm going to have a list of all the cards that have 0 or less power in Marvel Snap in a hot second. Stay tuned for that. It's very interesting to see. But some pros and cons for Annihilus. So, of course, he's the Junk Deck King. Let's go. He's the finisher. Right? You set up with that void from the sentry, the hood's out there, you got some rocks from debris. Boom! Perfect setup. Annihilus swings it all over. It's going to be a very good time. I can't wait to do that. It's going to be a lot of fun. And also, you can steal games, man. There's going to be so many people dipping, and I'm going to get into it in a second. It's a good thing and a bad thing, but you're basically to win on turn 5. And I think you want to play Annihilus on turn 5. There's some merit to turn 6, but we don't want our opponent to fill all those locations just yet. We want to flip them over. So I think the perfect time for Annihilus is actually turn 5, which puts them in a very difficult spot to be played on time, on curve. But regardless, we'll get to that in a second. The other thing I want to talk about, which is always so important when it comes to new card releases, is that if they have conditions built in like this, we have to look at future releases and always go, oh, that could work in an Annihilus deck, in a junk deck, right? We kind of did that with like Ravonna. Anything with, I believe, 1 or less power is going to get her discount. Well, Annihilus, anything with 0 or less power is, of course, going to get sent over. So anytime there's a new card that is released, like in December, there's Celine coming out, well, she has -1 power. That would be a brand new addition to an Annihilus deck. So that's pretty exciting. You can always look at new cards with negative power or 0 power and think, maybe that could work with this guy. Okay, some of the cons is that there's narrow application, there's a low amount of targets. I'm going to show you guys the targets in a second, but there's not a whole lot that you can bring in your deck to kind of make use of this effect. Not any ideal targets anyhow. We're going to see in a moment. And then narrow application, kind of like I was saying, like you have to play them on turn 5. Like you can play them on turn 6 maybe, but you don't want to really cheat a card out like this because you want to do more setup before you actually play it. So I think turn 5 is the ideal time to play Annihilus. And then of course, if we look at his stat line, it's not very good, but I didn't highlight anything here because essentially he does have a weak base stat line, not too bad in the 5 drops, but of course it's not ideal. But you know, when you look at the cards that you destroy, let's say you destroy a hood, it had -3, you're getting -3 off of your side of the board. So you can almost look at it like Annihilus as a 5-10 play in that scenario. And lastly, and again, this isn't necessarily a con, but is very important to talk about, is that I think this is going to be a card where you have a very high win rate, right? It's going to win you those games when played. We're talking like Hela, right? Hela gets played, she has a very high win rate because if you set up accordingly, you got to the point of playing her, you've probably stolen the game and you won. I feel like Annihilus is that same thing. If you set up accordingly, you drew the nuts, your opponent hasn't done a whole lot, you play Annihilus, you lock their board up on turn 5, you win the game, they retreat, leaving you, if you snapped accordingly, with 2 cubes, which is not going to net this card a whole lot of cubes when played. Something to keep in mind if you're a bit of a stat nerd and like to look at that sort of thing. I think it's going to have a high win rate, low cube rate, which isn't too bad. If people stick in, then that's great. If you can set up with a few nice little combos that I'm going to show you soon. But another thing is the feeling that this card provides to the Marvel Snap community. I think it's going to be a very negative experience for the large majority of players. This is a card like Alioth that just, you know, it's played and the opponent just goes, well, this sucks. I have to just re-queue because, well, Alioth is almost worse because it's on the final bell. But with Annihilus, like, it just doesn't feel good to have this played against you. So that would be my only concern. I feel like people are going to enjoy it for a week or so and then get really sick of this card. But I'm not. I'm going to love it. I'm going to keep playing it. All right. Okay, so let's check out the list of cards that have 0 or less power. Okay, so check this out. Now, of course, again, I want to reiterate that you can use negative power to get cards under the threshold so that it works, right? But this is a series of cards. This is a list of cards that naturally help Annihilus with the switching over, with the destruction, and anything like that, okay? The cards on the bottom here, right, with the asterisks, I'm putting those in their own category because by the time you actually play Annihilus, there's a good shot that they don't have 0 or less power, right? And the Sunspot's going to probably get a bit of unspent energy. Why are you running Sunspot with Annihilus? Darkhawk ongoing is going to trigger. He's going to have power. He's not going to get flipped over. Just all these cards you don't really want to flip over. Even Dracula, I know he wouldn't have, you could theoretically flip over Dracula, but why would you want to? That's going to end up maybe being a really good play for your opponent. So like these are like the avoid them kind of, don't deck build with these in mind. I would probably avoid them. But on the other hand, we have the Void up here, Hobgoblin, Green Goblin in case they're on your side of the board, the Hood, Ninja spawning from a location, Widow's Bite if your opponent chooses to throw that into your hand, Mr. Negative, I don't think that's all that great, but hey, it's a thing. Illusions, Mysterio himself actually could get flipped over. I think that's a really spicy one because you got Debris throwing over 2 rocks on your side of the board. Illusions and Mysterio is 3 cards that you can flip to the other side. Of course, giving them Mysterio is giving them 4 power, but if you kind of just tally up your win-loss is how much power you need, that could be a really sick play. And of course, rocks. Mjolnir is another one. You don't really need Mjolnir after you've used it. So if you use it and then you get your Thor to like 10 power or whatever, and then you don't need the hammer, so you send it over. Get over there. And then Ironheart's another okay one. I mean, of course, pretty sweet that you can flip her over, but then you're giving other cards on your side of the board +2 power each. And if that hits one of your negative power cards, you don't really want to do that. So I don't see Ironheart being very good. Iron Man, of course, not good at all, unless you turn off the ongoing. But in general, we're not looking to set up with that. So as you can kind of see, as we deduct a bunch of cards here that don't really work, you're not left with a whole lot that you can bring to the table that you can deck build with. But I do have some really spicy decks. I think essentially what happens is you have a very narrow application. You have like 1 or 2 decks that Annihilus is going to perform well in because he is a junk card through and through. I tried messing around with a destroy list, which we'll look at, but not in love with it. So I feel like he's going to have 1 or 2 decks that might do very well. But outside of that, you're not getting a whole lot of use out of that card. And I could see people passing because of that reason. But there's your list. Take a screenshot if you need it for deck building. Let's get to some of the counters. So if you're looking to counter Annihilus, because it might be a little bit popular on its release, you have cards like Professor X. Professor X is the best counter because, of course, you're going to stop things from flipping over to your side of the board. You stop them from getting destroyed so that negative power is stuck on the Annihilus players' board, but also because it's a turn 5 play. I really like that because if you have priority, you play the Professor X, they played Annihilus, you lock them in, they already went for that play. They already reached for it. Now, of course, it could go the other way around. If your opponent has priority, then you flip the things, and then you're just locking yourself in with that negative power. So you just got to watch out, read, and assess the situation. Hopefully Daredevil gets fixed, and then it's an even better counter. But I think that's one of the better ones. Another one is Cosmo. Of course, if you have Cosmo, they play Annihilus into that. Nothing's going to happen. That sucks. Valkyrie is a very interesting one because she can essentially take that Void or that Hood or whatever's flipped over to their side of the board and turn it into power, a bonus power for them on that turn 6 swing, which is usually when Valkyrie likes to be played. So I think that's a really spicy, surprising, cube-stealing play against the Annihilus players if they haven't already, filled you up, locked down your board. And then another one is the Destroy archetype, right? Carnage, Killmonger, Deathlock, Venom. I mean, maybe not Venom necessarily, but all these cards that are going to destroy whatever you're trying to send over, or maybe destroy them on your side of the board before you can even send them over, like those rocks. That's going to be a bit of a bummer. It's going to really make it hard to actually clog their board and effectively play out your game plan. So those are the counters that I was thinking about, but I have some very fun decks I'm hyped to show you guys. All right, here we go. So the key synergies, kind of like what I was talking about earlier. You got the Hood, you got Sentry. I feel like you have to have every deck with Annihilus. You got to have those 2 cards, which is a lot of fun. And Debris probably too. I would toss all 3 of those into every single list that you look to make with Annihilus. And I think that's what I've done here. And then you got Death. Not too bad because if we have a lot of little things, you push them over with Annihilus, that's going to discount Death. That's pretty good, right? We tried that with the Annihilation deck in the middle there, which is essentially just a Destroy deck, but I really don't love Annihilus for Destroy. I still wanted to make a deck just to show you guys what it might look like, and I probably don't have a perfect version here. I went with like Moon Girl to discount the Death, or double up the Death, a discounted Death that is, so that you have 2 and you can play them, blah, 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 all that stuff, and just destroy all your rocks. But like Killmonger just does the Annihilus job better in a destroy list, and it just makes me feel like he could easily be cut. He does not need to be there. But the other two decks are hype. So we have Toxic Waste. Let's talk about Hazmat. A great combination with Annihilus. We can take Squirrel Girl, dish out all those squirrels. Oh, she's actually got 1/2. I forgot about that, but she's a 1/2 nowadays. Anyways, you use the Hazmat combo. It makes them 0 or less. You throw over the squirrels. Great. We can also use a Man Thing. What a great combo. He's going to give -2 power to these 1-drops, 2-drops, or 3-drops. Also kind of motivating your opponent to play elsewhere because they don't want to play into the Man Thing location. And then you swamp them, right? You throw over those rocks. They're already getting hit by the Man Thing effect. It's going to be great. It's going to be such a cool play. The rocks, the squirrels, all that stuff. Then we got Wong to double down on that. Wong for even some you could even use Wong here for some crazy sentry plays to get 2 voids and then flip them over with Annihilus. I think that would be hilarious. -20 to their side. And again, if the location is full, they're just going to get destroyed anyway, so it's not that bad of a game plan. You shoot for 20. If you get get 10 over there, it's great. If you get none, it's okay because you destroyed the -20 on your side. You got rid of it, which is crazy. That's like a 27 power play, essentially, when you play Annihilus. But anyways, I think that deck could be a lot of fun. It's very combo-y and a different take on the junk style with Annihilus. But of course, let's talk about now, if you stuck around, you stuck around for the right time, because the Junk King deck is the deck, guys. This is the deck. I cannot wait to play this list. We've got everything to annoy our opponents, to make them play stuff, to push things over. The Debris, the Green Goblin, the Sentry for the Void, the Hobgoblin, the Man-Thing, Debris. I already said Debris doesn't even matter. The Hood, Mysterio clones as well, just because I want to set up the best Annihilus ever. I want to shove everything over to their side of the board and have a lot of fun with it. I cannot wait. Now, I would have liked to run Daredevil and Professor X in this list, believe it or not, because I think they're really good for the junk deck. You lock up the lane where there's still an open position for your opponent, so that turn 6 they can't play anything. Or you lock up, one of those junk locations just to make sure that you won it. But at the time, Daredevil is bugged and the combo isn't doing so hot. So until that's fixed, I would go with this and not that. But one of the best combos about this deck is with Alioth, right? So I've been playing a lot of this deck, actually. Very similar version. Last month when Man-Thing came out, it helped me get to Infinite. And then also this month has been helping me get to Infinite. So I can't wait for Annihilus. But with Alioth, essentially what you do is you set up a scenario so that you're winning 1 or maybe 2 locations. Doesn't necessarily matter, but you've locked up your opponent so bad, clearly only have 1 spot to play. So your Alioth hit is easy. You know they're going to play there. You play the card there. It reveals or it doesn't matter. You smack it with Alioth. You win the game. You steal it right out. So I think the Junk King is going to be the list to play. I'll have the link in the description below. And also I'll have a detailed guide on these deck lists on CCGHub. Definitely check it out. Link in the description. But there you go. Those are the key synergies, counters, and all kinds of cards that you can use with Annihilus. But at the end of the day, we got to talk about whether this card is a snap or a pass, because this is 6,000 tokens. This is a Series 5 release, which is not cheap. So let's talk about it. All right, everybody. I try not to do this with the snap or pass videos. I think in our history of doing this, I might have only done this one other time, and I'm doing it again here because ultimately a card like this with such a narrow application, you really gotta look deep down and think, do I like to play junk decks in Marvel Snap? Am I interested in trying out that archetype? Because this card is going to be fantastic. It's going to be great in that archetype in those lists. I think it's going to be a strong card at the end of the day. But it, again, in only 1 or 2 decks, so it's very narrow on how you're actually going to play it. And if you get bored of that deck, then you're not using this brand new card, which you spent 6,000 tokens on, or use some spotlight caches. So it's very difficult for me to say, yeah, go for it. Use those resources when they're so few and far between. This game is so expensive, and it's getting more expensive on the horizon until something changes. So if you're really interested in this card, go for it. If you're not, I would pass. I know that's kind of a lame answer. If you want my personal answer, what I'm doing with this card is I'm using spotlight caches. I'm opening this card up, and I'm also going to get the variant that's featured. It's the Annihilation variant that's been rotating above my head because I want that one so bad. So I'm going all in on Annihilus. I love this archetype, so I'm very hyped. But you gotta do you. You gotta think, is this card worth it for you, your game style, your gameplay, your preferences for Marvel Snap, okay? So just keep that in mind. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, everybody. It's been great talking about Annihilus. If you're not subscribed, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel and like the video. Helps me out a ton. But as always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.